Facebook people.
Hi, everybody. We are here.
We are live with Kittens Getting in Trouble.
Yes, got kittens.
It's our life.
Kittens doing what kittens do, and
booking last minute tours right before showtime, which is always fun. But hey, tours. You now stop trying to eat Jared Leto.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Woohoo! 4 years.
4 years.
For Blog Talk Radio.
Oh yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you talk.
Apparently, I've lost my husband's phone today.
Yes, you completely lost him today. My apologies.
Yes, it's the 4-year anniversary of Vibe Network, and yay, we've been on it for 2 years now.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years. We've been doing the radio show. Of course, we've been doing the Facebook Live thing since the whole pandemic thing started, and it shut us down. And we had so much fun doing it that
we kept going.
Once we were able to start doing the tours again, and yeah,
we're still going.
And we're still going because this is fun, and we get to talk with people like this. And there's as a matter of fact, there's one of those people right now. There's Patrick. Happy Monday.
Patrick.
Yep, good to see you. So
cheers.
Yes, cheers, everybody. So we are well, you can always catch up with our live streams later, and
yes.
we definitely miss Kiana. I think I got that right. Kiana too. So.
Yep.
And there's Trina. Hi, Trina.
Hey, Trina. Trina learned something new this week with one of our posts.
Yes.
Welcome to Krampus.
Just a couple days ago, we had Krampus knocked.
Yes.
So the night, December 5th, when Krampus, which is basically Santa's evil doppelganger, comes around and beats all the naughty children.
It's Santa from the Upside Down. I love how he described it like that.
Yes.
Because it's the truth.
Yeah.
The Upside Down's been around for quite some time.
Yeah. So,
and those of you who are not familiar with Stranger Things, you need to get caught up. They're filming season 4 right now.
It's worth it.
It is.
So,
all right, so things have been a bit crazy.
Yeah, but good.
Chris and I ran away.
We did. We ran away. Although we're back in our normal environment. So you probably saw we posted some pretty pictures and stuff like that for this Facebook Live thing as we were getting ready.
Because we were researching.
We just got back from spending a week down in Key West. Had a great time. That's a cat. Don't mind her. But yeah, had a great time down there, checking out spooky stuff as we do everywhere we go. And
of course, we went on a ghost tour because that's what we do, and actually
got a little bit of sun,
got a little bit of snorkeling and swimming in. Stayed outdoors mostly. Did a lot of outdoor stuff, which was fantastic.
Masks. Lots of masks.
Yeah,
so
they
were
are
safe.
much stricter in Key West than we are here in Virginia, and we felt very safe. So.
Yep. So we played it safe.
Washed all the masks when we got home, though.
Yep. But had a good time. So yeah, cheers! And in celebration, I got my little tropical drink here tonight. It's called a Dark and Stormy. We've had them before on the show.
I've got a hot toddy.
Dark and Stormy is rum mixed with ginger beer. Ginger ale, ginger beer. So
with a lime.
Yes, with some lime. And
but it's a very popular drink in the tropicals, so we decided it was appropriate.
Very appropriate for tonight.
I'm chilly, so I'm having hot toddy.
There's nothing wrong with hot toddies. I love hot toddies.
I was going to say, it's quite strong, actually.
But yeah, so we have some spooky tales from Key West to share with you tonight, and we did actually learn a few things to go ahead and be able to share with you. And we
actually scoped out all the places we're going to talk about, so we made sure we knew exactly what they are today, because the stories that I found are a couple of years old, so we wanted to make sure they were up to date on what they were being used for.
Yeah, and if you have been watching, you know that we have done some episodes in the past along the lines of like haunted beaches and haunted dolls, and we did touch on some previous. Must try some. We touched on some other Key West stories from the past.
Yeah, namely Robert the Doll.
Robert the Doll is the big one.
And actually, the tour we went on originally when we went to Key West a couple years ago no longer sees Robert the Doll as part of their tour. He's now a completely different experience known as the Robert the Doll Experience, run by David Slum, who's actually the premier author of the Key West Ghost Stories. He's the original Key West ghost tour guide, and has helped start and run other ghost tours, and now he runs the Robert the Doll Experience. And one of our guide that actually took us out is actually pretty good friends with him, and is also a paranormal investigator in the area, and he gave us an interesting insight. We had talked about you're supposed to ask permission to take Robert's picture, but he warned us that's not a good thing to do. And the main thing is that the Martello Towers, that the fort that the doll is in, is actually haunted by over 40 ghosts, was it?
Something like that.
Apparently the cats are doing something they shouldn't.
Shocker.
But yeah, so the problem with asking to take his picture is it might not be Robert who's responding to you. It could be one of the other ghosts, and you could be opening a whole can of worms with that. So what you do is you become Robert's friend, and you act like his friend. You let him know, hey, Robert, I would like to be a friend, and friends take pictures of each other. I'm going to take a picture, okay? And you take pictures with him that way. That way he knows it's directed to him, it's about him, and it's about the friendship that he craves and that he wants, that he hasn't had since Eugene passed away. So that was really cool. Now, the other place that we actually stay at Simonton Court when we're in Key West, which is a fantastic old cigar factory, and they have the original cigar workers' cottages, which is in what Chris and I stayed in. They also have the manor house of the owner of the cigar factory, so you get to stay either in the factory, in the cottages, or in the manor house. And the manor house is directly across from the artist house, which is Eugene's old house, where Robert used to be. And they still sometimes see things happen up in the tower where Robert once was held. So that was kind of cool.
Yep.
That we stayed right across from that.
Got to see it every day.
Yep, it's very gorgeous Victorian.
Yep. Most of the homes in Old Key West are beautiful.
Yeah, or in the process of being restored. There are a couple of them that I'm like, what were you thinking? You look like a military space something or other, but yeah, there's only one of those. But yeah, so we got to go around and we got to visit some of these places. We got to see a few other places that are haunted, but we didn't actually write about them this time because we're going to hold them in reserve for another storytelling session. Do we have questions?
No, I'm just having issues with the... There we go.
Okay, fixed.
Something like that.
Everything electrical seems to be sassing you today.
Yeah, basically.
We need to stop that.
Welcome back.
Alright, so we'll let you wet your whistle and you can start talking since I've just been monologuing.
Sure. You'll have to cap off the rum bottle in the kitchen.
Oh.
Cat's playing with it.
Cat toy.
So.
Good thing I put the lime away.
Yeah. So, for Haunted Key West tonight, now, if you've never been to Key West, and you hear people talk about it, it might go ahead and it might conjure images of like this tropical paradise full of pirates and rum runners and cigar factories, wreckers, which are basically, people that went out, salvagers, fishermen, artists, and writers, and honestly, you'd be completely right. That's basically what Key West is. Thousands of people, including President Truman and Ernest Hemingway, have chosen Key West for its something special that makes it a little different from any other place. It's kind of the Key West magic. Now, the first inhabitants of the Florida Keys were actually the Seminole and the Calusa Indians. The Calusa were mainly in the Upper Keys and under constant attack by the more aggressive Seminole Indians. They would move from key to key, hoping to avoid battle until they reached the southernmost key. Here, the bloody battle finally took place, and the Calusa that survived are said to have paddled the 90 miles to Cuba in canoes to escape. Spanish explorers that did come along later found that the southernmost key in the 16th century, while they were searching for safe routes to go ahead and get through the Straits of Florida. Coincidentally, the safe route to get through the Straits of Florida is right next to what we know as Key West today. But when the Spanish came ashore there, they discovered the remains of that ancient bloody Indian battle. The beaches were littered with the bones from the dead. This gave the island its nickname Cayo Hueso, which roughly translates to Island of Bones. Now, many of the bones were arranged in intricate patterns or hung in trees, and this caused the Spanish to believe that the island was used as a massive burial site. For decades, Cayo Hueso was little more than a layover spot. Pirates and smugglers used the keys for concealment, Cubans and Bahamians would fish in the area. Wreckers and salvagers would harvest hardwood and salvage wrecks, but no permanent settlement was established on the key until we fast forward to the 1800s. 1815, the governor of Cuba deeds the island to Juan Pablo Salas, who then sells it twice. Got a bridge to sell you. In 1821 and 1822, Florida is then transferred to the United States by Spain in 1821 as part of a debt settlement, so we have a whole ownership mess. Who owns Cayo Hueso? Lawsuit. The ownership question is a mess until John W. Simonton wins the legal battle over the deed of the island and becomes one of the 4 founding families of the newly dubbed and much more appealingly named Key West. Now, John Simonton might sound familiar because we were talking about Simonton Court on Simonton Street, all named after Mr. Simonton. So Simonton, along with Pardon Green, John Whitehead, and John Fleming, which you can find streets named after them as well, laid the groundwork for what would become a bustling community of the Caribbean.
Yeah, I need to do some family research because I have Whiteheads in my family. I'd be curious to know if I have a connection.
Get digging.
Ancestry.com, here I come.
So, now, this little spot here mostly started with Simonton lobbying hard for a naval base to be set up on Key West because of its strategic location and, coincidentally, to bring law and order to the place. Simonton got his wish, and this led to the Keys remaining as a Union stronghold during the Civil War, with Fort Jefferson out 70 miles to the west in the Dry Tortugas, eventually becoming a major prison for some kind of highly notable people from the Civil War, including Dr. Samuel Mudd, who was the individual who set John Wilkes Booth's leg after John Wilkes Booth broke his leg during the Lincoln assassination. So Mudd winds up at the Dry Tortugas, and he acts as the fort's doctor, even though he is a prisoner, and he is eventually released for having provided his services. As time goes on, we get into the 1900s, 19th century brought major industry to the Keys as well. Salt manufacturing, fishing, wrecking. Then there's the 10 Years' War in Cuba from the 1860s to 1870s, which brought many Cuban refugees to the island. They helped to establish over 18 cigar factories on the island, so things are really starting to evolve and gain some traction down here in Key West. The 20th century connects the Keys with the Florida mainland with the Overseas Railway first in 1912. Unfortunately, most of the railway was destroyed by a hurricane on Labor Day of 1935. It was then rebuilt as an auto highway completed in 1938, which became an extension of the famous Route 1, which ends at Mile 0 in Key West, right outside Key West City Hall. So,
which we've driven twice now.
Yes. Then also, other fun facts, Pan Am Airlines was founded in Key West all the way back in 1926. It regularly served as a route between Cuba and the U.S. for people and for mail. And U.S. presidents have stayed in the Keys as well, including Ulysses S. Grant, Grover Cleveland, William Howard Taft, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. But it was Harry S. Truman who spent a total of 175 days in Key West over the course of 11 visits that really kind of put Key West on the spot as a presidential retreat. So this is when the first officers' quarters at the naval base became known as the Little White House and the Truman Annex. So several
Which
other...
it's still known as today.
Yes. So
and it's still active as a presidential retreat today.
Yep. So
if I'm president, you can bet that's where I'm vacationing. Just saying.
Several other presidents and high-ranking dignitaries have stayed there and is still maintained by the Secret Service to this day. But it still plays second fiddle to the most famous house in all of Key West, which of course belonged to Ernest Hemingway, with its world-renowned six-toed cats that are all descended from Ernest Hemingway's cat, Snowball, who was given to him by a ship captain. So, yep, Snowball and Snowball's descendants still roam the grounds down there and have a lot of fun by all accounts.
Now, also, you have to realize, too, Hemingway wasn't the only famous author who has lived in Key West or currently lives in Key West. Tennessee Williams actually lived there for over 40 years. He lived there up until the early 80s. So he was very popular in the area and has his own museum as well, but it's overshadowed by Hemingway. And Judy Blume, the child author, actually, our children's author, still lives there today, and she still operates a bookstore in Key West today.
Yeah.
So, it's still a very popular place for authors.
Yep. So lots of artistic energy, lots of military energy, lots of tragic energy, and of course plenty of party energy to this day.
There's 3 forts on the island, plus the dry tortugas. They were all part of the same fort system. We have been to all 3 of the ones now on the island.
Yes. Yep.
And we've been to dry tortugas.
Yep.
Because the cats scare us. So yeah, it's a fascinating place to go. A lot of people will say it's really touristy, but you can easily choose things that are not touristy at all and do more cultural and fun things like we were doing.
Yep. We had fun.
Yeah. All right.
So with that said, we haven't really gotten into the ghost yet, but yeah, lots of energy down there, all kinds of various history, all of which feeds into these various specters that still linger about the island to this day.
It's a very haunted place.
Yes. So we are going to start at a place that's just around the corner from where we stayed. This full place is called the Audubon House, and it's one of, not the oldest, but one of the oldest buildings on the island.
Yeah, and actually almost got torn down.
Yep.
But we'll get into that.
Yep.
So the house was built by Captain John Hurling Geiger in the 1840s, and he was a harbor pilot and also a master wrecker, and he made his fortune from salvaging goods from the ships that crashed on the reefs. Now this is pretty common. That's how a lot of people on the Keys made their fortune. Now the house is a 3-story conch house with brick pathways meandering around bamboo palms and old orange jasmine trees. Now Pete, who's an employee at the house, had been told about the strange going-ons in this house by other employees. They spoke of lights flickering, of strange noises coming from an empty room, but those could be explained by a house settling or faulty wiring for the flickering of lights. But Pete's first encounter actually happened his 3rd year working at the house. He had arrived at work at 8 a.m. and went about the usual tasks of turning off the security alarms, inspecting the rooms, and opening up the porches. As he opened the front door to place 2 rocking chairs on the porch, he saw an apparition of a woman 4 foot in front of him. She appeared to be in her 50s and was wearing a light blue dress with a full-length apron with frills and a white cap. Pete watched as she moved back and forth on several times on one step before disappearing. The figure seemed very familiar to him, and he called out Lucrezia, which was Mrs. Geiger's name. She was the mother of 12, and she had spent most of her life in this house. Other sightings and manifestations occur on the 3rd floor, in and around one of the rooms that was used by the Geiger children. At one time, the house outside of the room in the hallway hung an old oilogram. Prior to the photographs, people would preserve the memory of their loved ones at their time of death by having a family portrait painted, and the deceased member would be part of that portrait. Now, if you look closely at the eyes of the child, you can tell it was one of these post-mortem portraits. Supposedly, this child's spirit still lingers in the area of the house on the 3rd floor. Today, the room is set up to be an exhibit for the life of the Geiger children, and that has moved from the 3rd floor down to the 2nd floor. The 3rd floor now shows it as just artifacts from the Geiger's life and other articles about their life, including some of the logbooks from Captain Geiger. So it's all personal artifacts at the moment, you know. Now, also during this, the time that the Geigers lived up in this house, that 3rd floor room was also used for a medical room for when the yellow fever swept through the Key West. And unfortunately, it was a quarantine room, and one son did die here in this room. But he actually didn't die from yellow fever. He died because he had fallen out of an almond tree and severely injured himself, and it took a little while, but he did pass away from his injuries. Employees experienced cold chills in this room, hearing mysterious small footsteps and seeing a child's apparition in the room. In days when the children's room was the exhibit on the 3rd floor, it would be laden with antique toys, the children's furniture, the children's clothing, an old baby carriage with an antique doll named Mrs. Peck. Now, for several months, this room was the focal point of numerous paranormal occurrences at the Audubon house. Several reports of motion and thermal alarms would go off at 2 a.m., faces in the window of the 3rd floor room, and several other happenings that caused Officer Dixon and the manager of the house, Tom, to have to meet on an almost nightly occasion. Nothing was ever missing after a thorough search of the property. After one of the searches, Officer Dixon went to Officer Dixon. Tom bid the officer goodnight, and he didn't mean he was actually truly alone at that point in time. That particular night had been the result of one of the many reports of seeing a face in the window on the 3rd floor. No alarms had been triggered, but Tom was feeling very frustrated. If somebody had been there, alarms should have gone off. Tom called the alarm company from inside the children's room and asked them to do a full systems check the next day. When he hung up the phone, he felt like he was being watched and happened to look down at Mrs. Peck, the antique doll who was laying in the baby carriage. She stared back at him innocently, but Tom swears that night she had been watching him the entire time that he was in the room. Her eyes would follow him as he moved around, checking to make sure that everything was there. The following morning, the alarm system crew worked on the system. The staff had actually decided to begin a detailed inventory of all the items in the house, which included a detailed description and photograph. So they started breaking up into different parts. Every person would take either the description, the history of the piece, or the photographs. By the end of the day, one woman had been photographing over 100 items, but Mrs. Peck is the one who actually stuck in Bonnie's mind. She just could not get that image out of her head, even though she only photographed it twice. Now, she went home. She tried to make a meal. She tried to relax with a glass of wine, and nothing was working. And, of course, that night she dreamed of Mrs. Peck. She actually dreamed that she was possessed by the doll. To say the least, the dream freaked her out. And when she went to go pick up the photographs on Monday to bring them into work and start the process of combining the descriptions with the photographs, she came across Mrs. Peck's photograph, and every other photograph at this point in time had come out beautifully. There was no problem with it. But Mrs. Peck's had a black slash across it, like you would see in a no picture, nothing sort of, don't go here sign. And at first she thought, oh God, it's a camera strap. And then she realized, no, the camera that she was using didn't have a strap on it. So she went into the room and she looked around and she tried standing in various locations to recreate the shadow the way it would have been in the picture. And she couldn't recreate it. So it was very, very odd for her. And it upset her enough that she went to Tom. And she actually told Tom what had happened to her that day, what had happened to her that night, and then showed him the photograph, and he confided in her that he thinks something's not quite right with the Mrs. Peck doll. He wouldn't quite say it was a lie, but he kind of hinted at it. So visitors at this point in time actually started reporting that Mrs. Peck's eyes would follow them around in the rooms, and that whenever they tried to take pictures of her, they would come out wrong, blurry, something was in the middle covering her image. So they started saying that Mrs. Peck was haunted, and people came to the Audubon house to see the haunted doll, Mrs. Peck. Well, this got the imagination in 1996 of Ernest, who arrived from England for a BBC documentary. He toured the Audubon house and was told about Mrs. Peck, the haunted doll, and the guide informed him that guests had great difficulty photographing the doll. He said, well, really? And he just took a bunch of pictures of her.
Poo on that.
Yeah, just poo-poo, no way.
No, don't believe it.
Well, he actually left the house and he pulled onto Route 1, and the camera that was sitting next to him on the passenger seat just popped open and exposed all of his film. No reason for it, no bump, nothing, it just out it goes.
Bye-bye pictures.
So he had to return the next day to the house and get more pictures of the doll, but this time when he showed up right at the beginning when it was opening time, and they went upstairs so he could take more pictures, and Mrs. Peck wasn't there. She was there the night before, no alarms had sounded, nothing, that doll had just disappeared. They tried to find her. They actually put out a search for her and a reward for her. And as they were trying to find out more about her, that's when more information about this doll came to life. More people are able to inform the Audubon house about the doll. So she's 22 inches tall. She has a wax head, arms, and legs. Her torso, however, is made out of cloth. There are dark circles that line her eyes, and little yellow teeth that protrude from her mouth, adding to a sickly appearance to her. She was built in England in 1850. Now, the stories are that the doll maker searched the world for the perfect model, and once the subject was found, the work commenced. Unfortunately, the model died before the doll was completed. And it said that when they passed the doll next to the model, they were unable to tell the difference between the two. Many claim that this is when the doll became possessed with the soul of the child. And as we talked about in our prior haunted doll episodes, that's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Some also say that the soul that is actually in Mrs. Peck is actually that of the child that died in that room after falling out of the almond tree. So it's possible it's one of the Geiger children. However, Mrs. Peck has never been found. She may have been stolen, as some claim. Others say that she just got up on her own free will and walked out of the house. Either way, she has been dubbed the Demon Doll by the newspapers, and there is a reward offered for her return. However, since that she has left the house, no more alarms have been set off. There have been no more faces in the window on the third floor. She seems to have been the cause of all of that.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
So, very curious about where she wound up.
Yeah, so some fun facts about the Audubon house. I'm going to let you take over.
So the Audubon house. Now, the Audubon house is named after John James Audubon, who is the very famous artist who went and sketched all the very realistic portraits of birds all over the place. Mm-hmm. And so the house is named after him, but he never laid eyes on the place, let alone stayed there for any length of time, and that's because Audubon visited the Florida Keys in the 1830s to document and paint the various local birds. During this time, he got to know Captain Geiger, and as we previously noted, the captain didn't build the Audubon house until the 1840s. So, descendants of Captain Geiger lived in the house until the last, who was William Bradford Smith, passed away in 1956. At this point, the home was barely still standing. It had no electricity, no running water, and the property was set to be demolished in favor of a gas station come 1958. But local preservationist Jesse Porter seized on the association between Captain Geiger and Audubon and caught the mayor's ear with a little white lie. She told him that they could not possibly lose the historic property where John James Audubon stayed during his visit to the Keys. So obviously that didn't happen, but she used this little white lie to go ahead and buy herself some time. Well, she called Mitchell and Francis Wolfson to inform them about the building's impending doom. Now, the Wolfsons had very strong ties to Key West and a love for the work of John James Audubon.
They were collectors.
Yes, they were collectors, so the Wolfsons purchased the home and had it renovated over the course of a couple of years, and the Audubon House Museum opened in 1960 to commemorate Audubon's visit to Key West in 1832, and it shares his artwork throughout the house today. So,
yep.
Yeah.
And they're actually very open about their ghosts. If you go on their website, they actually have video clips of things that have happened on paranormal investigations that have happened there. Chris and I were actually discussing that if we were able to get a ghost trip to Key West together, we would definitely see about taking a group in there to get an investigation if we could arrange for that.
Yep.
Because it is a very active house. While we were going around it, while I was on the third floor, actually, I had somebody following me around and touching my hip, and I was like, okay, time to leave now.
She didn't stick around very long on the third floor with me.
Yeah, very cool artifacts out there, and I loved it, but when you have a small hand constantly touching your hip, sorry, I'm gone. So, yeah. I'd be very cool. I'd be really interesting to see what Merlin would pick up there.
Yes, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Yep. And we got Donnie joining us now. Hi, Donnie.
Hey, Don.
So we got other locations to talk about. We're not going to talk about the Audubon House all evening, as tempting as it is. Very
as
beautiful,
gorgeous as it is.
Gorgeous place. So, the next location we have also equally as gorgeous. Just about everything down in Key West seems to be pretty gorgeous. With that said, we're going to talk about the Red Rooster Inn. Now, the Red Rooster Inn was originally the Delgado family home, and then became a flop house, a brothel, and an affordable housing unit for the Coast Guard before being turned into an inn. So it has kind of a little bit of a checkered past.
Now, it's no longer called the Red Rooster Inn, just so you know, but at the time of the story, that's what it was called.
You can look up Red Rooster Inn online, and hits will show up, but you can't go there and book rooms there anymore.
Yeah, it's part of a conglomerate of places to stay. You can still stay there.
But it's not the Red Rooster Inn
Yeah.
anymore. So, now it's a beautiful Queen Anne style home with a unique concrete front porch. Kind of an important point. Now, this story comes from Maria and Brian Delgado. Maria's Nana had grown up in Key West, and she would often tell Maria stories of shipwrecks and presidential visits while sitting on her front porch in Minnesota. As they drove along Route 1 coming into Key West, Maria felt a strong familiarity with the city even though she had never been there before. She was able to direct her husband to the inn without consulting the directions or the map. After the couple checked in and headed to the pool for cocktails and swimming, they met the owners, Jim and Gary. Maria mentioned the strange familiarity she kept experiencing, and Jim suggested it might have something to do with her name. He went on to explain about the inn having been the family home of the Delgado family since the late 1800s. The Delgados were one of the largest cigar manufacturers in Key West. The home was built in 1870 and served as the family home for a number of years. Maria and Jim found this to be an interesting coincidence since Nana had talked about ancestors who worked in the cigar trade in Key West, but didn't mention the house. As they got ready for dinner, Maria stepped out of the shower and smelled cigar smoke. Normally the smell of Brian's cigars from his poker nights at home bothered her, but this smell was different. A bit different, but definitely still cigar smoke. She told him to go outside to smoke his cigar, and Brian stood up from his chair, hands raised to show her that he did not have a cigar. Brian also smelled it and agreed it was sweeter and smoother than the cigars that he normally smoked himself. They checked outside the room and no one was there. Brian jokingly suggested it was an ancestor checking in on Maria. After dinner and then sloppy joes for dancing and drinks, they decided to turn in for the night. Maria entered the room and smelt the cigar smoke again, and just as quickly as before, it disappeared. Maria was too tired to worry about it and went straight to bed. Brian, however, had a craving for his own stogie and went out to the pool to smoke one. Shortly afterward, he left Maria to go out, and it was not the closing of the door that woke Maria, but the cigar smoke that had returned. This time, she was sure it was Brian smoking in the room. She ignored him and pretended to sleep, but after a few minutes, she felt Brian's weight as he sat down on the bed beside her. Still feigning sleep, she rolled over a bit to flop her arm onto his leg, but Brian was not there. She opened her eyes and stared in disbelief at the impression on the mattress next to her. Someone or something had been sitting there, but had not been her husband. Just then the door swung open and she screamed. Her husband entered, asking what was wrong. She explained what had happened, but Brian chalked it up to a dream. Eventually, Maria calmed down and went back to sleep. The next morning, Brian and Maria mentioned the cigar scent in their room to Jim, and he informed them that they were not the first to report such an occurrence, and that Mr. Delgado is said to haunt his old house. The rich cigar scent is said to have been his favorite brand. Jim was called away before he could finish his tale, and Maria was beginning to think that there was a familiar connection, but she couldn't figure out how, since the only Delgado and cigar industry connection she knew about was her great-grandfather's brother, and he had died in Cuba. There was no way he could be haunting a house in Key West. After returning to their room from an outing, Maria and Brian walked into their room to discover an old Cuban man standing at the foot of their bed. She asked him what he was doing in their room, but no answer. He just stared at them. Brian then tried saying, "This room is occupied. You can't be here." The man continued to stare blankly at them as if he hadn't heard them. Brian started towards the man as he turned transparent, then opaque, then disappeared completely. They stood silently shocked, debating whether or not they were losing their minds before Maria stated, "We need to find Jim." After a brief search, they found Jim in the adjoining Chelsea house, and he continued his history. It seems Mr. Delgado mysteriously disappeared one October, never to be seen again. His wife told neighbors that he had gone to Cuba to take care of some business for the cigar company, and he would be back soon. Days, months, became years, and no sign of Mr. Delgado. Many in town assumed he had run off with a mistress or was dead. No one suspected foul play, and many felt sorry for Mrs. Delgado. She never accepted the pity and avoided attention. As she lay on her deathbed, she confessed to murdering her husband and burying him under the house. She died before she could say where. A search of the grounds was conducted, but no body was ever found. As a last resort, the wooden front porch was removed as the area beneath could be searched, or so that the area beneath could be searched. But again, nothing was found. The original porch was replaced with a concrete version. In the 1950s, the ghost stories of Mr. Delgado started circulating. Mostly his appearance happens to be in October. Some say he is trying to show where his body is, while others say he has no idea he is dead. The locals call the concrete porch the largest grave in Key West.
And it's still there. It's covered around with a bunch of shrubbery, but you can just barely see through enough to see it.
It's very unusual when you know what you're looking for and you do catch a glimpse of it. It's like, why does this beautiful wooden house have a concrete porch
that
attached to the front?
That is literally this high at Billy.
Yep. Largest grave marker in Key West.
Yeah, so anybody want to go with us on a trip to Key West for some haunts? I think we might seriously have to.
We'll get there. One thing at a time, dear. One thing at a time.
All right, so we're going to move on to the Gato house. And this is actually the former Mercedes Hospital. Again, we also drove by this one as well, and it was a little hard to figure out exactly what it is today. I was trying to go online. We didn't stop to actually look. We didn't see any signage out front, but some people are like, oh, it's a cigar factory museum. It's a apartment complex. I don't know what it is for sure. But we do know at one point in time it was a hospital, and it was also an apartment complex when our stories actually take place. So our story is about Larry Stanford, who doesn't believe in the paranormal whatsoever. He is a very scientific, mathematical-minded person, and if he cannot see an explanation using science or math, then it does not exist. I'd love to introduce him to Robert and his crew. Or to Brad and his crew. CPRI.
Yes.
Anyway, so he decided to leave corporate America at the age of 27, and he was going to go to Key West, and he was going to bartend as a way to kind of pass the time and figure out exactly what he was going to do with his life, because corporate America wasn't it. So he moved into the Gato house and loved it because it was a short bicycle ride to the heart of Old Town. It was a quiet neighborhood. There are 11 units in the building at this time, and he figured it was a great way to meet people. His apartment was on the second floor towards the back, and after moving in all day, Larry was just too exhausted, so he decided to lay down on his couch and take a nap. When he woke up, it was dark outside, and he just decided, I'm staying in for the night, and that's when he heard 3 raps on his door. Kip, the neighbor next door, introduced himself and handed Larry a bottle of beer. They began talking when the name of the house came up. And Kip explained that it had once been a hospital named Casa de la Pobre, a poor hospital, and Larry joked that would make his mother feel much better rather than Cat House, which is the interpretation of it. And Kip told Larry, well, just don't mention to your mother that the place is haunted. Larry looked at him, and Kip went on to explain that Maria Valdez de Gastines served as the hospital's administrator from 1911 to 1941, and she was the lifeblood of the hospital. Many described her as a saint, and she is the one who is seen walking the corridors or showing up in people's apartments. Those who have seen her in the building describe her as short, stocky, with long white hair that has been pulled back away from her face into a bun. Maria worked long hours with her administrative duties, and because they were often short-staffed, she would also fill in and perform light nursing duties as well. Instead of taking breaks, she would go out on the streets soliciting donations. On payday, she would go door to door, ensuring that the hospital received the funds it needed to stay open. Maria worked at the hospital up until the day that she died in 1941. The hospital closed down the following year. Even before its closure, there was evidence that Maria never left the hospital. A few months after her death, a man checked into the hospital with severe pneumonia. Convinced of his impending death and unable to move on his own, he thought of his wife and his children and lamented that he would die without expressing his love for them. So he lay suffering, and a night nurse appeared at his bedside, asked if she could be of any assistance. He requested her help in penning a letter to his family, and she agreed. The two stayed together for an hour. The man dictated the letter while laying in bed, and the nurse patiently writing until he was finished. She then sealed the letter in an envelope, addressed it, and placed it on the windowsill next to his bed. She stayed with him then until he fell asleep. The following morning, the man awoke, and his condition had improved greatly. When the morning nurse made her rounds, he asked if he could summon the night nurse who had attended him so he could thank her. She informed him that she had been the only nurse on duty last night. He went on to describe the woman he had seen and been helped by, and the nurse recognized the description. She informed him that they once had a lady there that actually fit this description, but she had passed away. The man was insistent and pointed to the letter that she had helped him write. It was laying there on the windowsill. The nurse picked up the letter, stared in disbelief at the handwriting as she recognized Maria's hand. Even after hearing the story, Larry thought, great story, but I don't believe in ghosts. Well, Kip warned him that he would soon change his mind living there, and Larry would go on to meet many other neighbors, and they would share their own stories and experiences with Maria. One neighbor, Adriana, explained she had been suffering from the flu with a temperature of 102, and she was startled awake by an icy cold hand on her forehead. She opened her eyes to see the image of a woman standing over her bed. One hand was stretched across her forehead as if checking for her fever, and the other was on her wrist as if checking for her pulse. She tried to pull her arm away, but she couldn't. She tried to scream, but she couldn't. Adriana said she sensed that the woman was trying to help, and the woman sensed that Adriana was afraid, and she disappeared. Adriana said she woke up the next night to the same icy hand on her forehead and Maria standing next to her. Maria appeared 3 more times that night. On the third arrival, Adriana was able to actually have the courage to speak with Maria, telling her that she appreciated what Maria was trying to do, but it was frightening her. Maria took a step away and disappeared. Adriana had not seen her since, and Larry still did not believe in ghosts. Some months later, after Larry had gotten a job with one of the clubs on Duval Street, he met Howard. Howard had lived in Key West for 12 years and had once lived in Gato House about 3 years prior to meeting Larry. His rooms had been located in the front of the house overlooking the courtyard. He told Larry that one afternoon a woman appeared in the center of his room. He noticed that she was not alone this time. A man had appeared with her, but he stayed near the door. He was dressed like an engineer or a maintenance worker, and Howard got the distinct feeling that the two had some kind of relationship. The male ghost acted as if he was fixing a doorknob, but kept looking over his shoulder as if checking to see that Maria was all right. A sadness came over Maria's face, so Howard asked if she was okay. She nodded and replied she was fine. Howard then asked if there was anything he could do for her, but she just shook her head and said no, no, no. They both then faded away. Howard also mentioned that he saw her once more before moving out. She was walking down the stairs and smiled at him before fading away. Larry bought Howard a beer and thanked him for the stories. However, instead of having his usual response of, I don't believe in ghosts, Larry was feeling left out. It seems everybody has had an experience with Maria but him. Then 3 friends from Connecticut came down to stay with him during Fantasy Fest in October, and he came home one evening to tell them, all excited, that they had seen a ghost. Larry's friend Joey explained they had been sitting around drinking beer when the room grew cold. In the middle of the room appeared a column of silvery sparks. Joey likened it to the image of the transporter on Star Trek. It stayed for 5 seconds before it snapped back into a ball about the size of a grapefruit, and then disappeared completely. By the end of the year, Larry had moved out of Gato House and into an apartment closer to town. He never did see Maria, but he still hears about Maria from others who have seen her. I wouldn't mind meeting Maria. She sounds pretty cool. I mean, if she's going to take care of me when I'm sick, all for it, man.
So Trina mentioned she's actually a nurse.
Oh, cool, Trina.
Yep.
Yay,
Yep.
thank you.
And she says many moments with patients that are unexplainable by science.
Yep.
So, nurses rock.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
My grandmother was a nurse. My grandfather was a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Rock on. I don't like needles, so I will never be one.
Yeah, just not your thing. We're here doing this. We tell stories. You tell stories for. This is your living.
This is my living.
This is what you do.
Yeah, my grandfather used to actually test his daughters to see which one of them would be a nurse. They both grew up to be teachers, by the way.
Yeah.
They didn't pass the test.
No. He was asking what wealthy man you were going to marry to take care of you. Yeah.
You're still the breadwinner. I own the company, but you're still the breadwinner.
Anyways. different subject. On to something else.
Yes.
Yes. So.
Next story.
Yeah. Now, I think, let's see, we got a couple locations left. And both of these last couple of locations, last couple of sections that we have here relate to the dear Mr. Ernest Hemingway.
So I did a little play on words. I called it Hemingway's Haunts, because haunts also means a place that you hang out.
Yes. Now,
and, well, they're also haunted.
Hemingway, we don't have time to get into all of it, but he was a mind-blowingly fascinating man in his life. Just traveled the world, was in the front lines, World War I, World War II.
Yeah, worked as a Red Cross driver, as an ambulance driver, got blown up in a mine, I think, if I remember correctly, in World War I. His blood-stained uniform is actually in one of the museums in Key West. Farewell to Arms is actually based off of his experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first book he wrote in Key West. When he showed up in Key West with his second wife, they were there to actually pick up a Ford. And I'll shut up next. I'm still in Chris's Center.
You're stepping on the toes of the story I'm about to tell.
And then...
So, yes, Mr. Hemingway, when Ernest and his wife Pauline, they came into Key West in 1928 on a steamer ship. Now, they were actually there to pick up Ernest's new Model A Ford from the Trevmore Ford dealership there, which is located at a place that's called Casa, Antigua today.
Which is one of the pictures we posted.
Yes, so now this is at 314 Simonton Street. It's actually like right next door to...
It's half a block up from where we stayed. We walk by it every day several times.
And
awesome building.
Yeah, it's served multiple purposes through the years. It has survived hurricanes and fires for well over 100 years. So it's a very resilient building, and it's a pretty massive building, actually, which, when you think about it, really kind of starts to make sense, because this was used as a car dealership, for one. And when they got there...
This is first floor, by the way.
Yeah.
It's a 3-story building.
They get there to pick up this Model A, and they find that the shipment has been delayed, and so they were given lodging at the Trevmore Hotel.
Which was floors 2 and 3.
Of the Trevmore dealership building. So yeah, there's a hotel, it's a car dealership, all kind of mashed into one. Kind of very interesting. They ultimately wind up staying there for 7 weeks, and it was during this time that Hemingway completed the first draft of A Farewell to Arms there at Casa Antigua. He and Pauline fell in love with the island and ultimately purchased the now Hemingway house and stayed there for another 13 years.
Thanks to Pauline's uncle, by the way.
Yes.
He bought it for $8,000.
Yeah, it was a fixer-upper, but they fixed it up all right. So, reports of hauntings at Casa Antigua are quite common. Most of the ghost tours stop at Casa Antigua, and the ghost here is known as the Watcher. And he seems very curious about the tours and the guides. He often appears as the guide starts to point out the plaque and begins to people watch, as many do who come to Key West. One evening, a woman on the tour reported seeing the Watcher in the doorway. She was startled because she had not seen the door open or seen somebody walk up to the doorway. He had just kind of appeared behind the guide. No one else in the group actually noticed him. She tried to communicate to the man to move, as it was very distracting to have him right behind the guide. She tried giving him the mom or the teacher look.
I'm really good at that.
Yes. At this moment, the gentleman turned and walked through the closed door. She reported the event to her guide at the end of the tour. The following evening, the guide was again speaking of the Watcher at the house when a loud bang sounded against the door. It was as if the door had slammed shut behind him, but it was firmly closed right from the moment when they first got there. The Watcher continues to bang against the door in order to keep the guides on their toes. The guide does not say for sure if it is the ghost of Hemingway, but the Watcher is described as a broad-shouldered man who looks blankly towards the street. When this was an auto shop, some men had passed away there in an accident when batteries exploded in the tropical heat. Now, when we took the tour, they did stop at Casa Antigua, but we had a fairly sizable group, actually, and to stop right in front of that door wouldn't have really been practical. So he ultimately took us around the side of the building, which it's there you can truly get the true scope of Casa Antigua.
It's right on an alleyway, so it goes like half the block down. The thing is huge.
Yeah.
But again, it's one of those things where he also mentioned that sometimes the watcher is seen in the alleyway leaning against the building, kind of watching down the alleyway at 2 a.m. in the morning. Now, that would have been the time that the rum runners would have come through, and he did mention that it's possible that building actually was a storage facility for some of the rum runners. So it could be somebody who died there. It could be a watcher from the rum running operation that happened. It could be Hemingway. You don't really know.
Yeah.
He's just known as the Watcher.
The Watcher of Casa Antigua.
Yep.
So, you want to do Ernest sees Earnest?
Yeah.
You want to do it? Yeah, I thought
because
you
it's
would.
a storyteller story.
I thought you would like this.
All right, so of course there is an Ernest Hemingway festival that takes place in July, and it's known as Hemingway Days. It's a 6-day festival that is dedicated to Hemingway. It includes a look-alike competition, a 3-day marlin fishing tournament, readings, book signings, a 5K race, paddleboarding race, running of the bulls, Key West style, of course, and more. Now, of course, the scaled-back version happened this past year because of COVID, but they did still have it. A lot of their events still went online and virtual, but they still did have the race. They still had the marlin fishing competition. I think that was it. They only had the 2 in person.
The 5K, the
paddleboard
race, too.
Yeah. Now, during one of the festival's years, there was a look-alike contest, and the competitors always like to gather at Sloppy Joe's to tell tales, tilt back some mojitos, as is the tradition. And one of the competitors, named Frank, when it came to his time to sort of talk and tell his story, he had a silent look across his face. He was silent for several moments, and he let the tension build because he is a good storyteller. He knows how to build that up. And finally, he broke the silence and asked the bartender to turn the lights down. As she did, Frank placed a Ouija board on the table in front of him.
Haunts of Richmond does not endorse the use of Ouija boards.
No.
With that said,
no.
Carry on.
Okay, going on. He began to say, the Ouija board has the power to connect us directly with the dead that move us among us. The ashes of man, General Chapman of the Conch Republic, who used to frequent the chart room, are interred in that very bar on which the mojitos you are enjoying were prepared. The bartender confirmed this by pointing to the spot where the ashes rest. Frank continued, Key West is known for its haunts, but earlier tonight I came face to face with the papa of all ghosts. Everyone leaned in to see if there was any hint of a lie in Frank's eyes, and none could be detected. Frank went on to describe the night as he neared the island's lighthouse. It was 8:22 p.m. He crossed over Whitehead Street, and he was amazed at the lack of activity around Hemingway's house. But he relished in the silence and used the quiet time to reflect on Hemingway. He walked toward the front gate and imagined he was Hemingway coming home from an evening on the town. He could almost sense what Hemingway felt as his boat shoes scuffled on the sidewalk and the scent of jasmine floated in the air. Frank placed his hands on the bars of the gate and he stood gazing at the house. He then heard a noise and realized he was not alone after all. A shadow on the upper veranda caught his eye, and Frank silently realized he was not alone, and he cursed the caretaker for interrupting his solitude. Then he saw the person step into the light, and his thoughts changed from anger to confusion, as old man Hemingway stood on the veranda not 20 yards in front of Frank. Frank swears he had not been drinking, and he knows what the experiences of others had had at the house. He then paused and think, it's got to be one of the other look-alike competition participants getting a special after-hours tour of the house. And he called up, "Hey, Ernest!" The man walked to the edge of the balcony and met Frank's gaze. Frank waved and said, "It's me, Frank." The man responded with a hearty wave before becoming transparent and disappearing. Frank was dumbfounded. As he regained his composure, he turned to leave. A cold breeze blew against his back and rushed through the gate, stirring up the leaves on the walk as it headed towards the front door. Frank left to meet his fellow Ernest for the evening drink. He went on to say, Call me crazy, but I do believe I met the ghost of Ernest Hemingway tonight. There was a moment of silence when all eyes followed Frank's, and there on the planchette of the Ouija board was resting, yes. Good storyteller. He knows the use of a prop. Still don't use a Ouija board. Just saying. Been there, done that. Had to put a few things away because of it. And I wasn't the one originally using it. Another story for another time.
Another time. So, we have, of course, now already touched on the Hemingway house. We mentioned it at the beginning, and we mentioned it just now with Frank seeing Ernest up there on the second story veranda. So
now's a special Hemingway ghost story because
yes.
everybody loves a certain type of ghost.
Yes. Now, the house is on Whitehead Street, as we previously mentioned. It's at 907 Whitehead Street, right across from the Key West Lighthouse. The house was constructed back in 1851 in the French colonial style by wealthy architect and salvager Asa Tift. It has an elevation of 16 feet above sea level, which is pretty remarkable for Key West. That makes it
very important because when the hurricane comes through, it survives.
Yes. So it's the second highest building site on the island. This and the 18-inch thick limestone walls have protected during tropical storms and hurricanes that have hit the island for well over 150 years.
And the Hemingway cats and the staff actually ride out the hurricanes in the wine cellar.
Yep.
Because it's nice and protected down there.
And the cats know when to come in. So.
Oh yeah, they know when the storm's brewing and they start heading for the wine cellar.
Yep. So, yeah, they don't even have to corral the kitty cats themselves. Now, anyways, as we mentioned, Hemingway's wife, Pauline, discovered the house on a scouting trip and labeled it Damn Haunted House. Pauline read this from the house right from the get-go, but the house at the time was in foreclosure and was in deep disrepair. She recognized its potential and convinced her wealthy uncle to purchase it for $8,000 as a wedding present for her and Ernest. Ernest appreciated the seclusion the lot offered for him to write. The Hemingways hired local conchs to restore the house. Pauline chose the interior decorations with Ernest's one requirement being that his hunting trophies had to be displayed. They converted the second story of the carriage house into Ernest's writing studio. Hemingway moved to Cuba in 1939 after their divorce in 1940. Pauline was wife number
2 out of 4.
Yeah.
No, she was 2 out of 4.
2 out of 4. Okay. Anyways, yeah, didn't work out. Hemingway moves out. Pauline stays there, lives there in the house until she passes away in 1951. It remains in the family until Ernest's suicide in 1961 up in Idaho, and his son sold it at auction later that year. Then it did open as a museum in 1964. There are many reports of the ghosts of Pauline and Ernest being seen in the house and in the gardens. Guests have experienced cold chills, shadow figures, and full-body apparitions. They have heard Ernest's typewriter clacking away in the early morning. Pauline has been seen smoking by the front gate. When approached, she disappears, but leaves behind a partly burnt cigarette, the same variety Pauline smoked in her life. While sightings of Ernest and Pauline's might be expected, did you know that the Hemingway cats haunt the grounds and buildings as well?
Yeah, there's a burial ground down there for the cats, by the way.
Yep. All the kitty cats ultimately get buried there. It's their final resting place, so yeah, it's very nice little.
They got a nice little garden area for
memorial
them with little stones.
Yep.
So they haunt as well, and they're very friendly.
Yes. So the original kitty cat, as we mentioned before, is Snowball, and he was known as a polydactyl. That meant he had extra toes. He had extra toe beans, extra peat. No, not extra peats. That's the whole thing. Extra toe beans. Anyways, and it was given to the Hemingways by a sea captain, and all of the cats that live on the property are descended from Snowball. When they pass away, they are buried at the pet cemetery. We already touched on all that. Repeating ourselves now. Now, here we go. This story comes from the De Lorenzos, who lived there in the early 1960s. This is basically that period of time after Ernest
has passed away and it gets sold. It was a private residence for a very short amount of time until too many people started asking, can we tour Hemingway's house?
Yeah.
And so she took the hint and turned it into a museum. She lived in what is now the gift shop area. She had converted that into apartments. And after she passed on and the Hemingway house continued as a museum, they actually rented out those apartments.
Yeah.
So that's where they're living, where the gift shop is today.
Well, actually, their room was above the carriage house.
Okay, so Earnest Writing Studio.
Earnest Writing Studio. So yeah, this is before the museum. So it's in that short period of time. Anyways, Nick DeLorenzo was surprised to see a cat in their room one night, as he was sure Joan had closed the doors before coming to bed. Joan assured him that she had closed the door and assumed that the cat had entered earlier and had been hiding under the bed. The black and white tuxedo decided to join them in bed. She hopped up on the mattress between their feet and proceeded to walk across Nick's legs until she was chest level. Innocent enough at first, her paws kneading and motor purring, the cat was in kitty heaven. Then Nick went to pet her, and she vanished into thin air. Nick wondered if he had been dreaming, but then it happened several more times. Early one morning, Nick felt the familiar paws across his chest and opened his eyes to see the same black and white cat with her face just inches from his nose. Meow! The cat stared into his eyes, faded in color, until she was transparent and disappeared without a trace. Joan said sleepily, "Can you open the door? The cat sounds like she wants to go out." At this point, Nick knew at least one Hemingway cat had more than 9 lives. They never did see her again.
Since you guys like ghost cats, we figured we'd leave you with a ghost cat.
Yes.
But those are our Key West stories. There are many more out there, so we'll probably do another Key West episode at some point in time. We have questions we need to answer. I saw Donnie said that limestone does hold energies, which is very true.
Yes, lots of energy in limestone, which makes the Hemingway house just a spiritual energy magnet.
Yes.
Yep, plenty of energy for Ernest, Pauline, and all the kitty cats to come back and spend the many years of the afterlife.
Yes, Chris actually got claimed by Liz Taylor while we were there. She decided she wanted lap time, and he was going to be the lap.
Yes. Yep. So I can have a picture. Well, you can't really share it right now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Might share it later. I'll share it in the comments afterwards or something like that.
Yep.
But yeah, Liz Taylor came over. Got a picture of her with you too.
Yep.
Yep.
Because after she got done with him, she decided my lap looked good.
Yep. She was very sweet.
She was.
She was very happy to be on somebody's lap and getting petted. She was a drooler.
She was I had a wet spot on my lap.
Yep. But
yeah,
yes.
a lot of really cool places. The oldest house that still stands in Key West is also haunted. We did get a chance to tour that. It was really cool. The Hard Rock Cafe, the building in which that is in, actually is haunted as well.
Stunning building.
Yeah. A lot of things happen up on the second floor. We didn't get to go up on the second floor.
Yeah, many of the restaurants and stores that face Duval Street today are actually in old restored houses. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole stretch of restaurants and whatnot in those old beautiful homes.
Yep. Of course, Dry Tortugas, Fort Jackson is haunted as well. And we mentioned the East Towers?
East Martella Towers?
Where the fort was.
That's where Robert is
That's
now.
where Robert is, and it is extremely haunted. And of course there are the pirates that like to still roam because they've buried things in and around Key West as well.
Mm. And I think we've done a couple of episodes on haunted ships and whatnot, but you could do an entire episode on the haunted ships and whatnot around Key West. I mean, if you want to talk about a ship graveyard, the Florida Straits in around the Keys and Key West there, very treacherous waters.
Extremely treacherous, and going to the Mel Fisher Museum is just fascinating to see all the wrecks that are documented and what they've discovered. So yeah, actually I'm pretty sure they have a few hauntings themselves there with all the artifacts that they have. There's a very interesting energy there.
Yeah. Capitol has a ghost cat. Glenn, are you talking about the
demon cat?
The demon cat in the U.S. Capitol? I think the one
that we talked about.
Yeah, we talked about it the day before Election Day. We talked about him.
Yep.
Yep, but yes.
So.
Brother lives at Clearwater, Florida. It's supposed to be haunted sites and places to go there. Doesn't surprise me at all. Mm-mm. Yep.
Need to get there. Need to get to St. Augustine.
Yes, we still have not done St. Augustine or Charleston for that matter.
Yeah.
We've been to Savannah and Key West multiple times now, but we still have not.
Maybe we need to do a Charleston St. Augustine trip.
darn.
Road trip!
More research.
Woohoo!
Oh.
All right. Yes,
But-
please, give us a reason to go traveling.
Yes. But yeah, so this was fun.
It was. It was a good vacation. I wish I
was-
was back there. We had a
Yeah.
hammock. It was nice.
We had a hammock. We had a nice quiet cottage. I don't think that the live stream would have gone so well there.
The Wi-Fi is not reliable.
Yeah, it was dicey at best, and I mean you're all the way out there at the end of the Florida Keys with just so much bandwidth down there. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it would have worked. Maybe not. But Trina says Key West is on her bucket list now. It definitely needs to be.
Yeah.
If you've never been to Key West, just absolutely beautiful. Very almost perfect weather, almost year round, as long as you dodge the hurricanes in the summer.
Yep.
But it never really gets too hot, never gets too cold.
Yeah, we've been in April. You've been in December,
Mhm.
which is extremely busy time of year for
Yeah.
them.
I think the coldest I've ever experienced down there was like in the 50s around the new year. And that's about as cold as
Yeah.
it ever gets. That's notably cold for them.
Yeah, and if you don't want the crowds, go when we did the week right after Thanksgiving. It's dead.
Yeah, the very first night we were there, that Saturday, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, it was
busy.
It was busy, but the day after that, basically everybody that was there for Thanksgiving week vacation cleared out, went home, and there were vacancy signs all over the place for the various hotels and whatnot. And walking up and down Duval Street, which is the main drag where
Yeah.
all the people go to party and stuff like that. Plenty of room to breathe and move about.
Yeah.
So.
And definitely ask for recommendations from the locals of where to go and where to eat and drink, because we got some fantastic recommendations,
Mhm.
and we stayed clear of a lot of the touristy spots. We went to a few of them,
Yeah.
because, well, happy hour specials are really good
And some of them, yeah.
at some of them, but some of the other ones, we just went to where the locals went. It was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Found a fantastic little dive bar.
oh yeah,
Mary Ellen's.
Mary Ellen's. If you want a dive bar, and I do mean dive bar, and really good grilled cheese when you're
Fantastic
drunk.
grilled cheese. Oh, that was amazing.
Yeah, go to Mary Ellen's.
We're reliving.
I'm drooling thinking of that grilled cheese.
It was good.
It was.
very good.
And they had bacon mac and cheese. That was so good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyway.
They had old fashions on draft. Old fashioned cocktails on draft.
Yeah.
Which was quite affordable and quite tasty, I might
Yeah.
add.
And there was a couple of different local pizza places that were family owned and operated that were really good.
Mm-hmm.
So
We took it all in.
we did. Can't wait to go back.
Again.
But yeah, go to one of the smaller inns. A lot of them are in the old houses. You know that it's going to be haunted. I'm pretty sure there's something at Simonton. I haven't figured out exactly what it is yet. It wasn't in the cottage, but I feel it back by the manor house.
Mm-hmm.
So the next time I think Chris and I are going to stay in the manor house.
Oh, darn.
Oh darn.
Oh, darn.
See, maybe I can find what I keep feeling while we're there.
In the meantime, who knows? You hinted at it. You did more than hint at it.
Yeah, I'm going to contact a friend of ours who's in the travel industry, and I'm going to see if we can arrange a haunted trip. And I think Key West is going to be our destination, and if everything goes according to what we would like, we would take a trip to Dry Tortugas. We would do a ghost hunt at the Audubon house.
Maybe the theater.
Maybe the theater if we can get in there.
Which we didn't talk about the theater tonight, but
No,
that's another one.
That's another haunted place that was literally right next to the artist house and right on the other side of our place. And see what we can arrange.
Yeah. One thing at a time, though. We just got back and we just started brainstorming the idea, so.
Yeah, so now I gotta find out logistics, how much time would be needed to plan something like this, how many people can we
Accommodate and stuff like that.
accommodate, flight stuff, all of that.
Yep. Lots and lots of little details.
Yeah, location that we could all stay in. What's the play fetch? But I think it'll be doable. I think it'd be a fun trip for everybody.
We'll see what happens. Day at a time.
Yep.
But thanks again, everybody, for watching. Oh, we'll be back in 2 weeks again.
And we're going to do Christmas ghost stories.
Because
again,
it's Christmas week.
Traditionally, Christmas was the time that you would tell ghost stories around the fire. So we're going to do that. I'm going to find some of the old stories and bring them up. And we're going to talk about it.
Yes. Yeah, so we'll have a good old Christmas holiday season ghost storytelling session in a couple of weeks. So, yep, we will be here, and yeah, that'll be our last one for the year.
It will be our last one for the year, but we'll be back in January.
Oh, of course.
We need to tell werewolves. We promised werewolves.
Werewolves and
state parks with
and state.
some more.
Yeah, with some
Lookout.
with some more stuff for Point Lookout for Glenn. So
I gotta do some more research, Glenn.
yep, we'll work it out somehow. I'm not going to be able to do a full episode on just Point Lookout, but we'll work Point Lookout in and have that be the headliner, so to speak.
Yep.
But yeah, so we got a lot of stuff to talk about. We're all planned out. We got our next 3 episodes, the framework going. So.
Yep.
Thanks again for watching, everybody, and as always,
Patrick wants werewolves.
But as always, thanks again for watching. If you have any questions, we're here. Shoot us a note anytime. Una begrudgingly says hello. She does not want.
She doesn't want to be on camera tonight. She wants to play fetch.
Glenn. So yeah, Glenn's birthday is January. I think Patrick, your birthday was January too, right? We were doing. Yeah. Yep. Oh, Donnie's birthday's in January too. Jeez. So many birthdays. Okay. Well.
A lot of January babies out there.
Yes. Anyways, drop us a note. If you don't drop us a note, we just hope to see you back here again in a couple weeks. And yeah, stay safe, stay spooky, everybody, and y'all have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.